We're gonna start recording.
First, or just you and I?
It's a little world.
Or today, or you can stay seated.
Yeah.
I'll call you up
Alright.
at the end for your part, okay?
Alright.
Alright, cool.
I'm gonna just answer questions.
So am I supposed to stand in the same place or you just straight me now?
You're
That's
gonna
the camera.
advance
up there.
yourself.
Maybe push repeat. I'm assuming.
Oh, which way am I supposed to face them?
Yes.
I seriously went there.
Alright, we'll go ahead and get started. We know this is your last presentation of the day, but it is so exciting. We're so happy to have you here. I think everybody has heard me enough today, but that's okay. My name is Cody Franklin. I'm the Youth and Family Services Manager here at FBC. And this is Amy Lewis, our O&M extraordinaire and the person that whips our interns into shape. So we've both been at FBC for, how long have we been here?
10 years.
10 years. I'm 14, so we love it. But today we're going to tell you a little bit about Cane Quest. So Cane Quest was originally started in California. It's a program that was designed by the Braille Institute. And so it has grown over the years, and so there's different states that agree to put it on, and there's different regionals and everything like that. So we started it 3 years ago.
Yeah, 4 or 5. We actually started with the Scouts, which is the 3rd through 6th grade, and then we added on the 7th through 12th grade later on. Who all has been to Cane Quest? Okay, so yeah, they originally started in the regionals. I think Alex had the list up. One of the problems with having regionals, Braille Institute was wanting to kind of create this as Braille Challenge where they had state ones and then the winners went to California, but it takes a lot of manpower and a lot of volunteers to run the programs, and so states that didn't have a lot of O&Ms, they weren't able to really kick it off the ground. So they're having the regionals, but they don't have people come to California, but they provide a lot of support. So.
Yep. So there's different categories, and so for each person that wants to participate, there's 2 different forms. So there's one for the parents to sign, saying yes, they're allowed to do it, and it explains what the program's all about, and that they'll be doing O&M, out on residential roads, things like that. And then there's a second form for the O&M instructor to fill out, and so that's just so that we know that they're capable and ready to participate in the event. And so maybe even if they're a little bit older but maybe are new to O&M, they might be able to go down to one of the lower levels. And actually this year we just opened a low vision route, so that's really exciting.
Yeah, so the Scouts is 3rd through 6th grade and they stay on campus, and then the 7th through 12th grade they go off campus and do street crossings and cane techniques and things like that. The classifications go through the how do you say it? The United States Association for Blind Athletes. And so originally when Braille Institute created Cane Quest, there's 4 categories for visual impairments through blind athletes. And so it was B1 through B4, but Braille Institute was only counting B1 and B2, which is basically totally blind to just like seeing hand movements, 2600 or something like that. So it counted out all of the low vision students that we had. And so we continued to do it, but we had, so many participants, and it was always recommended, people always asked for a low vision route. So this year, and Braille Institute said, we're working on it, we're going to work on it. Well, 10 years later, we said, can we just include our students? Originally, there was a doctoral student when they started Cane Quest that was comparing the O&M forms for each student the O&Ms would rate their student for each skill from 1 to 4, 4 being the best, and then they would take the scoring sheets after the event and compare the statistics and see which skills were, I think they were trying to decide at each age level what was appropriate and what wasn't, or what should be expected, I guess. Maybe not appropriate, but expectations for each student. Now that has finished and they're just doing internal tracking. So this year, like she said, we've done the low vision routes. We had 4 to 6 low vision contestants in the older route. We didn't include it in the scouts, the 3rd through 6th, because a lot of those skills are, if you can see like dropped objects, I mean, obviously you're gonna score 4 for just looking and picking it up. So we wanted to make it somewhat fair. But low vision students can participate in the scouts. They always have been able to. They just wear blindfolds, I was gonna say mask. Not while they're going from station to station, but at that, to perform that skill. I'm struggling. Okay.
That's okay.
All right. So, any questions so far? Alright, so who can volunteer? So obviously we need a lot of O&M instructors because they're especially off campus to rate scores. So how it works is the contestant, and they are careful to call it a contest instead of a competition, although Cesar is it a competition.
Cesar's out for blood.
Yeah, it gets a little intense. I mean, there's some high-ranking prizes like iPads and mini iPads and things like that. So, what was I saying? I got distracted by the iPads in my head.
About who you need to
yes. So, during the contest, each student goes, or contestant goes from station to station to get scored. So at a station, for example, I'll say, Cody, we're going to give you some instructions, and as you do that, I will rate you, and then you will go to the next station. So one station may be constant contact cane technique, another one may be lighted street crossings if you're off campus. Later on you'll see some pictures of on campus and off campus, so we'll talk a little bit more about the skill sets later.
But yeah, this event takes about 70 volunteers to run because we have checkpoints here on campus for the scouts, and there's about 16 checkpoints. So all throughout, and then there's about 19 or 20 checkpoints for the bigger kids off campus.
Maybe a little bit less than that, yeah.
So we need people at all of those checkpoints. We need extra help sometimes we need more than one at a station. We need safety monitors. Those are people that are just spread out along the route to make sure nobody's getting, stepping in the street and everybody's safe. So it does take a lot of people. So.
And the safety monitors are told, like, let them try to correct themselves, but ultimately look out for them. You get ACBREP credits, 5 credits, continuing education credits for the day, and then TBIs when they volunteer, they get certificates as well. Because a lot of the stations, even off campus, like we have a tactile map station that you can score. On campus, there's a lot of basic O&M foundational skills that you might have learned in school. VRTs. We have a lot of paraeducators that volunteer, so takes a lot.
So we really try to recruit a lot of people by saying, hey, we have free continuing ed credits for you, or ACBREP.
And here on campus, it's free food and t-shirts. So everybody gets a t-shirt, everybody gets meals, and
yes.
It's fun to see the kids, and then we involve the parents, which we'll talk about. But all right, so we talked about that. All right, So parent involvement, you.
Sure. So for the little guys that are on campus, the scouts, they have a parent teammate. And so they might be instructing their parent, with their parent having a blindfold on, like how to pour water or different things like that, or showing their teammate how to get through a door properly using sighted guide. So it's been a really fun experience for the parents that have been involved. And sometimes they don't even know that they're going to be a teammate until they show up, and we're like, are you going to be their teammate? And they're like, what?
Just prove they didn't read the form.
Yeah, exactly. But it's been really, really fun. And so another thing that we like to do is, while the students are out competing, the parents will go around in a van with like Amy and Mary, our counselor, and I think Spencer's been a part of it as well. And so they're getting the opportunity to see their kids in action out there on the street by the busy traffic. And, you know, it's really been like an aha moment for them. And, you know, it can be quite emotional, you know, because of the fear, but it also can be really empowering too. So they have lots of really, really good discussion about that, and what they maybe, because of seeing their kids do this activity, what they will start letting their kids do, you know, at home. So,
well, and so the nice thing about the on-campus route, and it's a lot of times it's a parent, and we always tell them that it doesn't have to be the same person. You know, they can switch up the teammate as they go. And if they don't have a teammate, we provide one. We provide a volunteer. But it's nice because after they do the scoring, let's say the O&M, we'll tell them how to do the skill better for next year. So as the parent is there, they're teaching, they're showing the skill, and it's just a nice educational time. And like she said, out and about, we're talking to the parents as they go. So they don't get the feedback, and also the kids on campus, there's a contestant booklet that we write feedback in so that they can take it home as a souvenir and take to their O&M so they know what to work on better. And then for the off-campus kids, Braille Institute, everything is copyrighted for Cane Quest, so they've asked that the scoring rubrics aren't like disseminated to everybody, although they're getting out there. The more you volunteer, the more you collect. So, we take the basic skill set name and we say scored 2 out of 4 on Human Guide or whatever, so to give them some basic idea of where they're scoring. And we've gotten some feedback that that's helpful. I know it's not probably as much as the O&Ms want, but we're trying to kind of meet halfway. So. Alright, so the next one. So the scout skills, and like I said, so I can't really give you all the rubrics and things like that, but for the 3rd through 6th grade, these are kind of the skills that they're doing. Standing in line, so like trying to use their cane to find the end of the line and go up to the front of the line. Locating a table and chair. With that one, I think they actually have to lead their teammate. Sound localization, Human Guide, pouring water. They teach their teammate actually how to pour the water, which is, there's a lot of laughs at that one when the adult has to put on the blindfold and try to figure out how to pour the water. Actually, I think the kids get more kick out of it than the adults, because they're like, you're spelling. Lateral directions, cardinal directions, stairs up, about face.
What's about face? Is that a 180 or what?
So like if you're in an elevator or a small space,
okay.
You're doing Human Guide and you
gotcha.
Look at it, yeah.
Okay.
Dropped objects, stairs down, entering a vehicle, so that we know that they can buckle their own seatbelt and things like that. Narrow passageway for Human Guide, block travel, writing a letter. So for writing a letter, it's not that they're pinning a document. They actually, they do write some, I believe the teammate has to write a letter, if I remember correctly. They have to fold it and then address the envelope. And
they have a guide for that.
Yeah, a writing guide. And I think the adults, once they open their eyes, they're like, oh, my handwriting. And then protective techniques. So. And then and again, They get rated from 1 to 4. And Braille Institute has it where everybody is supposed to get a 1. So for walking in the door, although that's not worded on the scoring, so we always tell the scorers, like, just do your best. And we didn't mention that we mentioned the iPads and things like that. That's for the 7th through 12th graders. The Scouts, the 3rd through 6th graders, there's a store. They get tokens for every point they earn, and they get to turn that in, kind of like Chuck E. Cheese or whatever, for prizes. So, for the 7th through 12th grade, the skills are like stairs down, cardinal directions, vehicle detection. So, like if there's a car in a driveway parked, you need to get across the sidewalk, street crossings, knowledge and anatomy of the cane, tactile maps. We spray paint those just to make it all fair, and use a blindfold. You'll see a sample of that. 2-point touch, cane technique, business driveways, seeking assistance, traffic lighted intersections, touch and drag technique, stairs up, doors with doorknobs or handles, and human guide. I know you could have read all those, but just in case you couldn't see the screen. So then we have pictures. So the top right, the top left, excuse me. It's the end of the day, end of the week. So that's contestant ready to do stairs up. Bottom right is the tactile maps. And that is actually one of our new low vision students. Next screen is top left. I believe she's either doing a cane technique along the sidewalk, or she's approaching the intersection, I'm not sure. And then the bottom right is the pouring of the water.
So that's his dad?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. And then top left is the cardinal directions, and then bottom right is, I believe, around the block that year. That was last year.
I think that was trailing.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Trailing around the block. Yeah, there's 2 different ones we've done up there, so I can't remember.
All right, well, now that you got a little bit of an overview, we thought it would be nice to get a student perspective as a participant of Cane Quest. So come on up, Cesar. This is Cesar Yanez. And tell us when you participated. Was it this last year?
Yeah, I participated this year or whenever it was, and then a couple other times. I just don't know how many times I've participated.
And did you win something this last year?
This year, yeah, but I think it's the first or second time I've gotten first place here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And what did you win?
I won a $100 Visa gift card thing, which I spent it really fast.
What'd you buy? Anything good?
No, I used it on an iTunes card.
Oh, well,
I know.
That works.
That works.
Yeah.
I guess.
So what do you like about participating in Cane Quest?
I just like actually practicing skills and then ending up like actually using them or whatever, because I don't think I'm gonna I don't use most of them, I guess, half the time. The only major ones I use are like probably just I don't know, the ones that involve me using my cane, and like I guess just I don't know.
What was particularly hard? Was there any checkpoint or anything?
I think the most difficult one for me is the sighted guide thing, because I don't really stick with sighted guide. I just travel by myself, so like I don't remember what half the things are called, or like about face and other stuff like that.
Okay, got it. What did you think of opening and closing ceremony?
I think that the music was really, the music that you picked, or I'm guessing you picked, was alright.
Oh, I think we have a new music picker for next year.
Nope. I thought it was alright.
Use that $100 iTunes.
That's right. That's right.
And then the closing ceremony was great because it didn't really take that long, and like other times. But yeah, so like I think everything I just think this went quicker, so it's fine.
Got it. Well, we do make a big deal of opening and closing ceremonies. We have a red carpet, and we have volunteers
Cesar,
lining on each
Johnny!
side. Yeah.
Who's the better announcer, closing or opening ceremonies?
I don't know.
And so the volunteers are all lined up along the red carpet, and they have canes, and they hold them overhead. There's a cane arch that they come under, and we've got great announcers, and so we hype it up. We make it a really big deal, so it's lots of fun. All right. Is there anything else you want to tell us about King Quest?
I think one thing should be more challenging. I guess where they tell us what direction we're facing, they should actually have us figure out which way we're facing without them telling us which way we're facing first.
Oh, okay.
See how difficult
Good
it is.
feedback.
That's all.
Awesome.
Good
Okay.
feedback.
Anything else you want to share about King Quest?
Nope.
Okay. Awesome.
Pretty fun.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Anything else you want to say, Amy?
I just want to see if there's any questions from the audience.
Cool. Thank you, Cesar. Go ahead and have a seat, and then we'll turn it over to our interns.
All right.
So this is Alex and Kim, and I'll let them
Oh, boy.
introduce themselves in their presentation.
So I'm Alex Fabriga. I'm an O&M intern from the Florida State University. And then there's also Kimberly Nelson.
I'm Kim. I am from Georgia, but I went to the Northern Illinois University for my schooling, so I'm here for my internship.
We have a good exchange. I'm doing the presentation, she made the PowerPoint, so we're all doing it. So the International Orientation Mobility Online Symposium. What's the worst part about going to something like AER?
Travel.
Typically the going to AER part. You gotta take care of your caseload, you gotta get there, there's expenses involved, you gotta wear a nice shirt. None of these are important when you go to the online symposium. Don't even have to wear pants, no one's gonna know. There were a total of 12 presentations, and I think it covered almost like 16 hours of content, 14 hours of content, and we're going to go over all of that in fine detail in the next half hour. So the 12 presentations, I'm going to read them all at you now. There was the Tommy Edison experience. What about rehabilitation with a retinal implant? Using curriculum-based mobile games to reinforce skills for students with visual impairments. Making the transition from white cane to guide dog. What orientation and mobility specialists should know. Perceptual navigation and sonar vision. Applying cutting-edge science to long-standing practice. We're all in this together. Essential steps for effective collaboration in orientation and mobility. Raising expectations using structured discovery. And I think they had a structured discovery thing today. I did not go to that session. But access for all, pedestrian enhancements, education and enforcement, a whole new fleet of app tools, 20 great ways to use the handy camera for an itinerant orientation mobility specialist working with visually impaired children, transition and self-determination, how orientation and mobility professionals can help, and touch signals and tactile strategies for teaching orientation and mobility to students with deaf blindness. All right, we're just gonna shoot through all of these relatively quickly. So the first one is the Tommy Edison experience. Tommy Edison has had a successful radio career, and he's now a film reviewer, and he was born with, do you remember the visual impairment off the top of your head? He was born with particularly low vision, and I hate how this sounds, but this is kind of your classic overcoming story that is at pretty much every conference you're going to go to. There's usually at least one. He used a lot of humor during his presentation, and he talked about the importance of finding and sticking to one's passion. Then we had retinal implants. I thought this one was super interesting. So have you guys heard about the Argus retinal implant? Yeah, so it is most prominent with retinitis pigmentosa. And when I first heard about it, I thought it was going to give you a relative semblance to what typical vision looks like. But as I said, it's a 10x6 grid of dots that are black and white and shades of gray. So it's not like you are getting typical vision, you're getting kind of a whole other thing. And it's sort of like a guide dog in that it will only be implanted once a person can prove substantial O&M skills up front, because it is a very intensive task to use it. Like it's very difficult to learn, and you have to be constantly scanning for the image to be updating. So it's just like how you sweep with a cane, you have to sweep with your eyes to keep a consistent image being updated. And half of the entire process is just learning to interpret what this pattern of dots means. What that shape means, you're probably coming up at stairs, or you're looking at the intersection of a wall, or there's a crowd of people in front of you. So it is not a sudden, look at that, you have vision again. It's just another tool that one can use in their O&M. And it is implanted directly into the globe of the eye. All right, and then we have using curriculum-based mobile games to reinforce skills for students with visual impairments. I thought this one was especially useful. Blindfold games is becoming more and more prominent. I've seen more and more students using it. Blindfold Racer is the one I've seen most often. What blindfold games have you played, Cesar?
Blindfold air hockey, blindfold racer, blindfold bowling, and some others I don't remember.
Would you say that they're legitimately fun?
Yeah, they are. The only problem, I guess, is that like you actually have to buy tokens or whatever. Or there used to be an option where you could watch an ad for them, but I don't know what happened to that.
Bummer. Well,
It's good feedback for them.
yeah. So they're coming out with a new line of these apps that are directly intended to be instructional. For example, there was one called Blindfold Battleship. You know how to play Battleship. You state a location like C3, B8. I sunk your battleship. You're all familiar. That teaches grid concepts. They had another one called Blindfold Barnyard, where you had to sort animals based on cardinal directions. Like when you click it, it'll make a sheep sound, and it just before told you that all sheep need to go to the north side of the screen, so that reinforces those cardinal directions. And then they also have a new line called Objective Ed Games, and all those are intended to be used as IEP goals. So the student will be able to get a score of 500 points in this game on this many trials. And one that I think will be particularly useful is one that will teach voiceover commands. So instead of just having to teach it rote how we are now, the one that showed was like a Simon game where it'll be if you flick right, quarter turn, rotor, 2-finger swipe up, and you have to be able to repeat all those patterns. And then in doing so, you learn these voiceover commands. Next, we have making the transition from white cane to guide dog, what orientation and mobility specialists should know. This was a pretty big overview, and a few of the bigger points were that the dog helps to act sort of as a partner in those stressful orientation and mobility situations. Like you just got lost in the parking lot in the example, instead of having to figure it out completely by your own, you have a companion there to provide not only the actual logistical support, but the morale support as well. She talked about 3 Ps of patience, practice, and perseverance. I think you could apply that to most O&M, but it was being specifically connected to the guide dogs. And a big point that she hit on was getting in and out of vehicles with the dog. I had personally not considered that before watching this. Typically you'd think the actual walking intersections, training, voice commands, but getting in and out of vehicles is a particularly difficult task that needs to be focused on. Next, we have perceptual navigation and sonar vision, applying cutting-edge science to long-standing practice. I thought this one was amazing. So Daniel Kish is arguably the father of modern echolocation as a form of travel, and he talked about his school of thought when it comes to both teaching echolocation and the things that go along with echolocation. For example, the cane he uses when he's using sonar travel is about 2 inches taller than he is. It's more of an NFB style cane. I think the tip is different. The body was carbon fiber, I believe, and the company that it made it was in some small Eastern European country that I don't remember off the top of my head. But this looks like it has the capacity to be a profound game changer in orientation and mobility. He talked about the techniques that you need to develop. For example, singing, audiating, making sounds while you're walking closer and farther away from objects, doing that with different sorts of objects until eventually you get a feel for how different textures reflect sound and then reflect different sounds as well. Yeah, and then the longer cane he argued was to equate to a longer visual preview. And then infants love cat toys. He really harped on that. Yeah. Yes. I imagine you were slightly curious. They're just very motivating to infants who are visually impaired. They tend to be kind of sparkly, fun to wave around. Babies are basically just cats.
It makes cool sound.
Yeah, they make fun sounds. Who doesn't love a good cat toy every now and again? Raising expectations using structured discovery. Did anybody attend the session today?
They're called that actually did the presentation with the other two.
Do you want to talk about it since you saw it today?
Well, don't put me on the spot or anything. I don't know, I mean, should I talk about today's presentation or?
So the video was just kind of a brief overview, and I think the most salient point is that both the instructor and the student are completely occluded during the process. It's a complete focus on the non-visual O&M travel skills. The philosophy that I can see is making sense behind it is that the student can witness the instructor problem solving in the same way that the student will have to problem solve themselves. They were really, really intent on the fact that you should not do this unless you are specifically trained in it. Seemed like a very logical position to come from. What'd you learn about it today?
Well, they didn't really touch that much on the part about the instructor being under blindfold as well. It was more about the problem solving and then being able to take whatever skills they learned from during their training and be able to go out into new environments and use those skills to navigate independently without needing to be specifically trained in that area.
So it is teaching the skill set of discovery as opposed to needing to teach every new environment individually. But it was very particular that one should not jump directly into street crossings with structured discovery. Start a nice, safe, interesting environment, work your way up.
Yeah, it's a whole certification structure. It's not like you dabble in it.
Yeah,
Go get, I think NOMC or something like that. You go
I was trying to remember what college it was done through.
Louisiana Tech.
Louisiana Tech.
Yeah, but it's more like a holistic approach than like just teaching skill upon skill and whatnot. It's more give the student time to try to come up with their own solutions and like self-problem solving skills along the way.
If you're looking for some learning opportunities and crawfish at the same time, it'd be a lovely opportunity. Visit Louisiana. Access for all, pedestrian enhancements, education, and enforcement. This was about those lovely O&M tools that we so profoundly rely on, like your truncated domes, your APSs, all these sorts of things. And this was specifically about when something in your environment is not as it should be, what are the steps that the orientation and mobility professional can take to try and get that problem ameliorated. Gave information on the contacts one can look to, like the Department of Transportation, Public Works, even the police department, which is not something I would have initially thought. Clarified that accessibility refers to both auditory and tactile signals. And then the big thing was take pictures. If that truncated dome set is aligned in a weird way that offsets someone's travel, take a picture of it. You don't go into these meetings, don't set up things unless you have the proof on hand, ready to demonstrate if you want to get these problems fixed. Whole new fleet of app tools. We just talked about some of these in a session today that Spencer was leading. These were all O&M travel apps. Do you remember what Lazarillo, what made it special?
This is the first time I've seen about half of those.
Yeah.
So it shows how many different pieces of technology are out there. It's never ending.
That was one of my biggest takeaways, is that it is really accelerating the pace of these sort of things.
Chris Tab has put some on the O&M Live binders. There's information about all these apps. So that's where I would refer you.
Yeah, if you're looking for particulars about these apps, that was some time ago that I watched the online
Well, he
symposium.
didn't get into particulars about them. There wasn't.
That's true.
It
He was
just
accused.
basically.
Like, this is an
Here's a
app
bunch
that
of
is here.
things.
This is also an app that exists. Check them out. So I recommend everyone check them out. 20 great ways to use the handy camera for an itinerant orientation and mobility specialist working with visually impaired children. The handy camera was basically a small handheld camera, pretty much as it sounds. I talked about the benefits, like it's a quality camera in low light, has good sound quality. It has a built-in projector, which I thought was pretty neat. So when you're sitting at that IEP meeting and people are doubting that your student has the capacity to do something, you slam it down on the table and you say, take a look right there. Videos are a very useful form of proof for pretty much anyone involved in the process. If the student has the requisite vision to use the videos, you can use it to point out specific problems and techniques that you want to shape. You can show it to parents who might be doubtful of their students' independence, other O&Ms, the rehab team, and the community at large. And then it talks about how the best note taker for an environment is a video of that environment. You can specifically refer to elements of it before going out.
Alex, I thought a couple of things that
Yeah.
stuck out to me in that presentation was that she also said she had a student who, when they went out to a particular intersection, even though the student, when she projected it on the wall, couldn't see the picture, but because she was standing where they usually stand, they could still listen and name when the parallel surge was going. So I thought that was interesting.
From the recording.
Mm-hmm.
That is
And then,
there we go.
and she recorded some lessons. You know, sometimes we record assessments and things like that, but she was like, it's a great way to just kind of go back and relook at things, because she had recorded a lesson and caught something that she had missed. So.
Best note taker there is. Actual video of the event. Transition and self-determination, how orientation and mobility professionals can help. This, by Dr. Karen Wolf, was talking a lot about that transition into independence, that transition into employment, a lot of the issues that employers see when a visually impaired person applies for a job. And a big thing she was talking about was show off those skills. This is the time to be ostentatious. I had a professor who referred to people who were not in the field as muggles because they just don't know anything about visual impairments. It's so low incidence that it is just not something that the average person has an intimate knowledge of. So it's time to give them a crash course, have them follow the student during the interview, have them demonstrate cane technique, show that these skills are something that the student will have the capacity to demonstrate at the workplace. Go over the employer's specific concerns. Like, this is, at that time of application is the time to get into that nitty-gritty. There's no benefit to beating around the bush. What are you worried about? What liabilities concern you? Let me show you what we can do about that. They talked about the value of networking as well. Touch signals and tactile strategies for teaching orientation and mobility to students with deaf blindness. Huge point with this is that you have to have a consistent vocabulary well before you go out into the field and try and do anything. The most challenging part of working with students who are deafblind is that communication. So having that well in advance will help to keep problems from arising. I learned the difference between tactile and haptic. I always thought those were pretty much the same thing, but tactile is the table's part and haptic is my part. That was interesting. Haptic is my part of the job, whereas the signal is tactile. Having an emergency signal is crucially important, and the one that was recommended was just a big X across the back, and that says we need to stop what's going on, probably switch to human guide, figure out the situation from there. And just like when working with any student who is visually impaired, it is very important to have a specific goodbye, because if you just leave, you no longer exist functionally. So making sure to have your introduction and your goodbye as a particular event of the lesson to help continue to build that rapport and that trust. All right, there we go. That was 14 hours of content. Do you have any questions on anything we talked about? Thank you all very much.
And just so you guys know,
minutes faster.
we don't have an actual date, but next January 2020 will be our next Cane Quest event. I know Rebecca, she's gonna come up for Marina again.
Yeah.
She's come for several years now, so hop on the train, and we'll be promoting it again at the fall conference. So.
And did anybody attend the International O&M Symposium?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's this year was at the end of January. So
It was really nice.
yeah,
Yeah, it was really good.
We could have had you join us.
Right, yeah.
Sit in the conference
Sit about
room.
it.
Lovely. What is the ratio of like students to adults for Cane Quest?
Oh my gosh.
It's an aggressive one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's like-
I don't even know, I
It's
mean.
like 1 to 24, if you did the math at one
Probably.
point. Yeah, brutal.
Yeah, but it's a wonderful event.
Oh, for sure.
And we always like to plan fun things for the kids during lunchtime, like a drum circle, or, one year we had inflatables, and, other times we plan different workshops for the parents, but what we found has been most effective is them going around in the van and getting to observe their kids in action.
All right, well, thank you all for coming.
Yes, thank you.